of the Global Alliance on Climate Smart Agriculture. My name is Imelda Bacudo from the ASEAN Climate Resilience Network, and I will be with you today for this 90 minutes of our cooking show where GACSA as a marketplace will bring you the best products and the best chefs in the world. You know, we thought of this idea because we're so tired of all the boring webinars. So we hope that you will see our analogy where GACSA as a platform that brings transformational partnerships in promoting climate smart agriculture at the global, regional, national, and local level will bring you, our partners, to ask about their best recipes and the best products that will bring about transformation in food systems. So welcome everyone. There's just a few rules. Our partners will be given a few minutes to give us their best recipe and their best products. And then we will have a question and answer. Please raise your hand or write your messages on the question and answer portion. And we have our good friend Simon Leyva here from the GACSA headquarters who will keep time. Simon, can we have a sample of your timing?
So when you got 1 minute left, I will do the gong. Look at this. So speakers.
Okay, so we cannot overcook. We cannot overcook our meals, right? So I would like to first of all welcome you to my kitchen in Bali, Indonesia. And now I will turn this over to the head chefs of GACSA, His Excellency Chef Hans Hoogeveen and Professor Lindiwe, Majele, Sibanda. But I think Hans will be the first one to give us his recipe or his meal. Is that correct?
Thank you very much, Didi. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends. It's a real pleasure for me to be at this cooking show. And cooking our meals has everything to do with climate smart agriculture, because we can cook our meals in a climate smart way. And I'm going to prove that to you, because I will prepare for you the most famous dish here in Italy, and that's tiramisu. It looks difficult, but I think it's easier than you think. But of course, everything counts on bringing the ingredients and climate smart agriculture into this dish. So every ingredient of a tiramisu can be produced in a climate smart way. And of course, we start with the mascarpone. Mascarpone, 750 gram. Now put it now in the bowl. Is of course a dairy product, a very famous dairy product in Italy. And of course we know that we have to make our dairy products much more sustainable and climate smart, and we can do it because dairy can be produced on the current land. We have now the technologies to fertilize our current land much better, so we can really avoid using new lands by burning down forests and destroying biodiversity. So the question, of course, is, and that's where we have to partner up, is to make sure that we can bring those technologies to the farmers all over the world, the farmers in Asia, the farmers in Africa, but certainly also the farmers in Latin America. And I've added now about 100 grams of sour cream, because that's an important ingredient of the tiramisu. The second ingredient are the eggs. And of course, the eggs can also produce in a very climate smart way. You have to split the egg yolk from the rest. So I will do that now. And you need about 6 eggs. And I put it in the bowl as well. And eggs, of course, can be produced in a climate smart and sustainable way. And it means, of course, that we have to use less antibiotics for our, You use less antibiotics and don't use antibiotics as a growth promoter for our chickens. And I think that's very important that we keep that in mind to make our dish even more sustainable. The third ingredient is sugar. And of course, sugar nowadays we have the, nowadays we have the possibility and the seeds for sugar, which can have less water and can stand and have lessen, or we can reduce the use of herbicides and pesticides. So the question again is, how are we going to bring those seeds to the, I would say, and probably Australia should put off his mic, but let's put the sugar into the bowl. And normally they say you have to use 6 spoons, but we have to make our diets also more healthy. And more healthy diet means less added sugar. So I only put now 3 spoons of sugar in it, so to make the tiramisu more healthy. You add a little bit of course, of other sugar into it, and that's the ingredient of the secret of the chef. And then everything comes to the coffee. That's the fourth ingredient. It's coffee together with brandy. Let's think about the coffee. Nowadays, Colombia and Chile are producing coffee in a way, in a climate smart and certainly in a climate friendly way. And they are labeling now their coffee with the label climate friendly produced. I think that's an excellent innovation, because now we can show to the consumers where to buy climate smart, climate friendly coffee. Of course, the coffee has to be cold. So I made the coffee already cold this morning, because you have to put it over the, I would say, the biscuits, the long finger biscuits. And then, of course, you have to add brandy or cognac. And of course, also that can be produced in a climate smart way, because nowadays it's possible to produce ecological brandy. So I put some spoons to it, about 3. And there we have now the most important ingredients for the tiramisu. But everything, of course, depends on how you bring those ingredients together. And that's the same with climate smart agriculture worldwide, but at a national and local basis. The first thing you have to do, and it's an important step, and that's also when you look to the farmers, we have to partner with the farmers. So what I will do, I will spread the coffee over the, because that's also very important ingredient, and that's the biscuit, the long finger biscuits, because that's the heart of the tiramisu. And also those can be produced in a very climate smart and sustainable way, with the sugars, less sugars, and of course the biscuit itself. I've put them here in a scale, and now put the coffee nicely over the long fingers. And by doing so, I think we have to take time how to produce our food. Think about our food, think about how we produce it, but also think about how we consume it. And think about consuming also when you go to the kitchen. Because if you buy your ingredients, you can buy sustainable produced ingredients. I think that is what we hope to get. Now, looking to the clock, I'm going to mix everything together in this bowl. Everything is here. And doing so, I give first the floor now to Didi to pass over the floor to my dear co-chair Lindiwe. Didi, you have the floor again.
Thank you very much. I wish I had the luxury of having the tiramisu dish. I'm speaking with you from my farm in Chegutu in Zimbabwe. The time now is just after 11. As your co-chef, it's good to be here, but then we've already had 4 hours work at the farm. We are coming back to the house for our breakfast. We do not have the luxury of preparing a fresh meal. What you see at the back is the leftover food from our dinner. This is going to be our breakfast for now, because our main meal we are going to cook now whilst we are resting in preparation for another run in our fields in the afternoon. Here in Zimbabwe, we've been blessed after 2 consecutive years of droughts. We've been blessed with our first rains of the season. And what we are told by the weather forecast is that this is going to be an El Niño year, which is going to yield better than normal rains. So everybody is on the farm preparing the lands ready for planting. Once we get the first 50 millimeters of rain, we'll be able to plant. At my farm, I'm currently going to put some hectareage under maize, some under millet, and under sorghum. And I'm excited because today, for my breakfast, I have a millet dish, which I'm going to be having with dried goat meat, which has been pounded. We added peanut butter and cabbage, so that gives us our vegetable, our protein, our carbohydrate source from the millet, and the tummy will be full and we're ready for our next meal. But maybe since the meal is already already prepared, I should tell you a bit about the Global Alliance for Climate Smart Agriculture. What excites me about this alliance is that we came together in 2014. At the time, we only had a membership of 46 organizations across the 5 continents where we work, in Africa, in Europe, in Asia, in the Pacific, and in North America. But we've now grown tenfold to about 480 members. That's an exciting growth in just a period of just over a year. And that means there's something that we are giving to our constituencies. What we've been good at is disseminating knowledge, providing a platform for sharing ideas. And the big urge is for us to scale up climate smart agriculture technologies that can help our farmers yield more for less. We are not just stopping at the farm. We would like to be engaged in the whole value chain. And that's why we are taking a food systems approach where we are moving from the farm to the fork. And that's why today we're talking to you as your chefs from our kitchen. In these kitchens, we want to reduce waste, because if we don't reduce our waste, we are going to be wanting to increase our yield, yet 1/3 of it is going to waste. So the kitchen is the starting place where we can reduce waste, but also at the farm level, where we can have better technologies to plant smart, harvest smart, process smart, but most important, bring healthier food to the table to our families. As an alliance, we realize that that can't be done without bringing together all the stakeholders that we need around the table. We start with the farmers who need the inputs. That means business is big in what we do. We also go to the value aggregators, those who buy the produce from the farmers, then the processors, those who market, but also the policymakers and the consumers. So in our kitchen, the most important person is the consumer. We need to be climate smart, both in the production front at the farm and at the fork where we consume, and we need those technologies that will make us yield better for less. I'm excited because what this platform as GACSA is bringing is an opportunity for matchmaking, where we bring those stakeholders who want solutions and those who are providing the solutions. And financing is a critical component of those ingredients that we have to bring both in our kitchens, in our farms, in the processing, and in the aggregation. So GACSA, as the Global Alliance for Climate Smart Agriculture, is the right supermarket for you to be shopping for ideas, where we can learn what is happening in our 5 regions and take it to scale. Because what's exciting about all these initiatives is that we're taking a food systems approach. Number 2, we're also looking at bringing all stakeholders. which is the partnership platform. But number 3, we are addressing all 17 sustainable development goals. Nothing can beat the food systems approach because all 17 goals are about food systems, and through GACSA, we are able to address those. I thank you. I now pass over to Dada, who is our moderator for the day.
Thank you so much, Professor Lindiwe. I really wish we could taste your breakfast once this pandemic is over. And thank you for showing us your kitchen and the farm life in Zimbabwe. But before we go any further, let's go back to Hans. I think he is finished with it while you were talking with very good words about GACSA. He is finally on his finishing touches with his tiramisu. And I swear, after the talk of Hans, I will never look at tiramisu the same way ever again. So let's see what Hans has finished for us.
Thank you, Dada. I'm finishing the dish. I show you, I have made the first layer. And now, of course, I've put the second layer. I've put, of course, the long fingers, the coffee, with what I made of mascarpone, sour cream, sugar, and a little bit other sugar, and of course coffee with brandy. And of course, what I said was about making livestock more sustainable, making how we work with our chicken more sustainable, less antibiotics, no growth promoters. Our sugar, better seeds with less herbicides and pesticides. So I now add the second layer to the tiramisu, and that was said also by Lindiwe. It has everything to do with matching the ingredients, matchmaking, and that's what Lindiwe was saying. That's everything about our food, but also everything about climate smart agriculture, and also everything about our alliance. Because what we have to do is we have to match our investments with our farmers. So in the whole value chain, because only then we will be able to also reduce our food loss. But we also have to make sure that our modern technology, but also our agroecology technology is available for the farmers. So we have to match them with the latest techniques. And last but not least, of course, we have to match them with the markets. We have to give them a fair price. We have to realize fair trade, and we have to make sure that they get what they are deserving. So I've put now the second layer. I give now the finishing touch with some cacao powder. And of course, that's what you always see when you go to eat tiramisu. And that's how we look to the future of our Alliance for Climate Smart Agriculture. In our next phase, we are going to match investments, match technologies, match innovations, and match trainings with programs and projects on the ground. It's a global problem with national, local solutions. I think that's everything about the future work of the Alliance for Climate Smart Agriculture. And the Netherlands government, to speed up this work, is going to give an investment, and again, in the Alliance for Climate Smart Agriculture with a considerable funding to make sure that it is going to happen. And Marcel will say something about it. But here you have, I would say, my famous tiramisu. Bon appetit.
Bon appetit. Thank you so much. I think that deserves an applause. And Hans is really saying, Chef Hans is really saying, Master Chef Hans is really saying, GACSA, its role on matching and really looking at, and Professor Lindiwe was also saying, really looking for investments and partnerships to make scaling up of the CSA practices happen. And I think what better way to look for our next ingredient or our next recipe from the private sector. And we've got a master chef representing the private sector. He's got a Michelin-starred restaurant, from what I understand. No, that's not true. But he's soon going to have a Michelin-starred restaurant, perhaps. From our friend, Tony Siantonas from the World Business Council on Sustainable Development. Tony, what's cooking in your kitchen? Where's your
Oh,
kitchen?
thank you, Dada, and thank you, Hans, and everyone else for having me. Hello, everyone. My name's Tony Shantinus, and I am one of the GACSA chefs. I work at the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. I'm actually calling you all today from our family's organic dairy farm in central Norway. So I'm proudly wearing my farmer's scarf, and I also have a cow-themed apron. So clearly dairy an important part of the work that we're doing here. But WBCSD is really proud to be a sous chef on GACSA's Investment Action Group with CSIRO as well, and you'll hear more from Lily in a minute. But our GACSA Investment Action Group has amazing recipes that are focusing on the role of finance and improved regional investments as a means to scale CSA solutions amongst our membership. So this investment requires us to clearly encourage we have to encourage the full investor community. So these are our dinner customers, if you like. They have to play that role in helping to scale solutions across both the public and the private sectors. Now, like all dinner customers who have to pay their bill, they expect real value for money. And so we have to cater for a big, diverse clientele here. We've got to deal with rural banks, multilateral development banks, agribusinesses, technology companies, small and medium-sized enterprises, and larger investor institutions. And what we've got to do is help to align all of these customers so that there is a really strong flow and supply of finance towards these CSA solutions. But we have to make sure that that finance goes towards a good set of bankable climate smart agriculture solutions for them to invest into. So I want to quickly give one very tasty example for you all today, the example of technology and innovation. Now, this is something very close to our heart on the farm here, since the milk that we produce is actually now produced by a milking robot. And we're also using organic feed produced on farm through open grazing, but also very strong soil health practices to actually make that milk. But when it comes to GACSA, recently our GACSA Investment Action Group presented findings on how digital climate advisory services can reach 100 million farmers, smallholder farmers, by 2030. And this was some work that we were doing supported by the Global Commission on Adaptation. And I would really like to shout out for all of you to keep an eye out for the Global Adaptation Summit coming in January, which will be a key place where you'll hear more on this. Now, what we did in our group was focused on how to ensure that financial sustainability was front and center for these services, and how public-private partnerships can be used to actually scale them up. And our feedback that we gave to GACSA members helped them learn how to overcome some of the big challenges to making that happen. For example, we know that many digital agricultural services that are adopted by smallholder farmers across countries in Africa and Asia in the past haven't necessarily worked that well. They haven't been tailored towards the needs of those farmers. And that eroded and reduced their trust in the service, meaning that they were less likely to actually adopt and turn to these solutions. So our findings mean that we are now including and supporting the development of strong and realistic business cases by the private sector that develop these services, so that they are more bankable and therefore can be more attractive to that investor community. We're also finding out ways to include the development of better or co-developed public-private partnerships across the region to roll out these solutions where they're needed, and think about things like last mile access and some of the challenges infrastructure-wise in not getting these services to where they're needed. So I'll stop there, and I'll just say that we're super excited about the Global Adaptation Summit coming up. We're excited about the Food Systems Summit next year, and we're really seeing the importance of investments being supported to CSA to accommodate all of the work that we need to do. And we think that GACSA is really well positioned to think about the big action tracks for the Food Systems Summit, things like strengthening rural livelihoods, the finance cross-cutting action track, and resilience and nature positive approaches for production. So back to you, Dada, and thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Tony. How amazing that we just came from kitchens in Zimbabwe, Holland, and now Norway. And it sounds very exciting, the future of investment for climate smart agriculture, once we've got those partnerships really going. And before I hand over to our next master chef, like the chefs that we've put here are only the best of the best, I would just like to remind everyone that no, GACSA has not folded up, that we're not going to go into real cooking show. We are making this as a side event for the Committee on World Food Security in preparation for the UN Food Summit in 2021. And I think today is even Food Day, Food System Day. And so we are really celebrating food this way. And GACSA as a marketplace, for those of us who came in late, Hans has already given us a climate smart tiramisu. I saw it on the comment section. And I think that's a very fitting title for Hans' recipe, a climate smart tiramisu. And so Tony has just also given us opportunities with the private sector and how GACSA is bringing forward these partnerships with the private sector. I would like to call on our chef, our next chef, who is Chef Ademola Braimoh, cooking from the World Bank kitchen. And Chef Ademola, actually, I heard that you used to cook in the Southeast Asian kitchen, and now you've gone to Africa. I wonder what favorite key ingredients you brought back from our region, from Southeast Asia, that you are now mixing as your secret ingredient in your cooking initiatives and where you are at the moment.
Okay, thank you very much, Dada, the moderator, and I'm happy to join you for the cooking show today. Well, at my background, you can see a couple of ingredients, which you are free to identify and send me some notes on how to harness those ingredients in your cooking. Now, you talked about Asia. I lived in Asia for about 6 years, and I noticed something about the agricultural practices there. It is production-centric. It is anchored in what we call the Green Revolution. Put in a lot of fertilizers, add pesticides, harness as much water as possible, spread it over the field. But how far has it led us? Not too far as food systems objectives are concerned. Focusing on grain production alone has made food calories very cheap and nutrients very expensive. Second, there is huge environmental footprint using a production-centric approach to agricultural and food system development. And third is the current challenge of the moment, climate change, and the need to lift people out of poverty and to reduce hunger, which is closely linked to the Sustainable Development Goals, like Professor Lindiwe mentioned the other time. So what are we doing then across the world in the World Bank? We are working with other development partners to change the paradigm of the production-centric approach into a holistic approach that is embedded in climate-smart agriculture. In the past, when the climate-smart agriculture movement started 10 years ago, we said that climate-smart agriculture has triple wins. But as we began to implement the climate smart agriculture concept, we actually found that it is not about triple wins, it is about multiple wins. Increased productivity, improved nutrition, enhanced resilience to climate change, increased jobs, and reduced environmental footprint, including reduced emissions, what is causing the climate change problem that we have currently. So what are we doing in collaboration with other development partners? The starting point is climate smart agriculture policies. Because if you want to change the food system, if you want to adapt the food system to the challenges of the moment, there has to be better climate smart policies, and that is programmed to address food and nutrition security. Currently in Africa, we have climate smart agriculture projects spread across 35 countries. And 3 billion of the total finance that is used for these climate smart agriculture projects are addressing adaptation and mitigation co-benefits. We are supporting about 9 million farmers. We are helping them to increase their climate resilience, and climate smart agricultural practices is covering about 10 million hectares of land as we're talking. We promote the adoption of improved livestock, water management, integrated soil fertility management, as well as digital agriculture, which is the next revolution that is important to help farmers harness the opportunities that the climate smart agriculture and food system have put around us. Let us not forget about the importance of agricultural research. We partner with CCAFs, for instance. We partner with CGIAR and other national agricultural systems to bring the best opportunities, to bring the state of science into play in terms of harnessing them into the food value chain systems for improved benefits. Now, there is the need to farm to fork approach. That is the food value chain system. And we use the market system approach to connect farmers, the poor farmers, to markets so that they can also have the opportunity to benefit from what the market opportunities has got in stock for them. Now, let me come back to the Asia-Africa connection that you started off with. How do we bring the best of Asia and the best of Africa together? Through South-South cooperation. South-South cooperation is important in that it connects policymakers and development practitioners within and across countries to learn from each other. So the recent South-South cooperation that we had just some few months ago, for instance, was between India and about 6 African countries. And what did we cover? And what did they learn from themselves? The development of climate smart agriculture villages. That's the first thing. Then the second thing is to bring researchers within these countries together to learn about climate smart crop breeds and livestock breeds, what we call climate ready cultivars. Then the third thing is about natural resources management. There has to be a reduction in environmental footprint, including greenhouse gas emissions. Lastly is the use of digital technology and mechanization to enhance food systems possibilities. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chef Ademola. And you really brought the attention of, I would imagine, the ingredients, not just the main meat, which is always production, but all the seasonings, all the other herbs like research, policies surrounding CSA, nutrition, how big our institutional support for CSA. These are all ingredients that should all go into a big pot, right? So thanks for bringing our attention to these key ingredients, as well as you mentioned South-South cooperation. I think that's what GACSA really facilitates, which is really the exchange of information among several networks. So don't forget our ASEAN Climate Resilience Network. Come back to our region, and we are doing a lot of exciting practices as well, and we would really love to cooperate and collaborate with the others. And before I hand to our next chef, our next chef is actually co-Filipina, I think. We haven't really spoken much about that, but Chef Lilly Camacho is, I believe, already cooking something even before we started in her kitchen in Australia. I let her share with us what she's cooking already, and I let her explain what CSIRO is all about. But she's cooking from the CSIRO kitchen. Chef
Good
Lilly.
evening, everyone. Thank you, Dada and Magandang Gabi. I didn't even know that you were Filipino as well. Welcome, everyone, to our kitchen here in Australia. I work at CSIRO, and I'm your other GACSA chef, as Tony has mentioned. And tonight, I'm just going to show you something that we feel very strongly about. It's a recipe for what we call Cliques, or climate information centers. Now, why am I going to talk about climate information centers? It's one of those dishes that really resonates very strongly with how we Australians love our food. We love things wonderfully fused from different cultures with a blend of ingredients that come together, easy to cook as well, but at the same time, you can tailor it to however you want to. So that's the beauty about Cliques. And essentially, Cliques is all about delivering relevant climate information on the ground level. And this is all about addressing climate risk. We talked about the farmers and their livelihoods and the rest of the value chain. All the actors in the chain rely on climate to make decisions. They rely on information on the ground. They rely on their networks. Cliques has provided that solution in many contexts before, and you can mostly see it in India. One of our colleagues at the moment, who's actually a participant in here, Uday Ndibulu, has come up with this project, and I'm talking on his behalf, and it's one of those things that we love to share. Now, what are the main ingredients for Cliques? There's a few things that you need to be wary of. It needs sound but diverse science. Essentially, you can have your classic cherry tomatoes that you get from your garden. You can grow them anywhere in here in Australia, and you can harvest them and pick them every day of the week, and you can have them ready. They're available for the chef, but they're reliable. You know they work all the time. You can try on other ingredients and add on different things. You can add your own cultural aspect to it. So as an example, this bunya nut that I have here, it's an indigenous food here in Australia. Araucaria bidwillii is the scientific name. And every 2 years, it just has it dumps its fruit as big as a football. And you've got to not make sure that you don't stand underneath it. But it's another type of ingredient you could bring into your Cliques, but it comes from an indigenous background, and you apply it together with your tomatoes that are fresh from the garden, and also any imported produce that you might want to add, although probably this orange is imported already. And together you come up with a product that is scalable. Now, when I talk about scaling for Cliques, we're not just talking about being able to reach a wide number of farmers or a wide number of communities. Indeed, it has done that. It's managed to reach, if I look at the numbers here, about it's aiming to go for about 500,000 farming families in South Asia. But the special thing about Cliques is that it scales deep. And that's why investors come to it. While scaling deep, I mean is that it has long-lasting impacts and it stays with the communities. That's because there's another key ingredient with Cliques, is that it's actually based on a bottom-up approach. It's very much rooted on community engagement and strong participatory research, so that all the initiatives are supported by the communities and taken forward by the communities themselves. That's a really, really important aspect to any dish that you'd like to serve to across the world. It needs to be owned by the people who will make the decisions themselves. And if you just impose it on them, well, they're not going to really enjoy your food, are they? You can't just tell the customer that this is what you're going to eat tonight. Sorry, you haven't got a choice. You've got to make them choose. You've got to help them through the way. But at the same time. You can also tease them with some wonderful smells. The beauty about Cliques is that as you're cooking it, it's this one of those dishes where the smells just waft through the kitchen and outside it. And that's what's happened with Cliques. As we applied it in many different circumstances, investors started coming and they started to cover certain parts of the scaling of the solution. As an example, a local MP in India actually decided that the best way to communicate Cliques to the vast number of communities was to set up plays. So to actually have a play in the community. So he hired a group of actors that would do a road show to talk about climate information centers and how it helps farming. And that had a long-lasting impact, but it just meant that it was owned by the communities too. And at the same time, as you do more of these, other funders come. So nowadays, Cliques can be found as being funded by IFAD, but it's also being funded by the Australian Water Partnership and ACR. And these diversity of partners supported by communities allows it to scale out, cover a huge number of communities, but also scale deep, and that it's rooted and owned by the communities. So good science, a dash of spice, and a lot of wonderful flavors blended together. That's the secret to it. Thanks, Dada.
Wonderful, Lily. I mean, you really sound like, my favorite show is MasterChef Australia. And I think you have a future there. And we would really love to taste this fruit, this Clique recipe. So if I can just let you know, can you write something where more people would get the recipe from Clique on the chat box? And that was really a wonderful sharing. And I can see that the question and answer is actually on fire with a lot of questions for those the master chefs who've already spoken. Thank you so much, Lily, for sharing such a wonderful recipe. We would like to get to know more about this recipe and scale this up everywhere. I think Ademola would agree with me, and for me, for the Southeast Asia region, we would really love to get more of these recipes. So our next master chef is actually not in the kitchen. As you can see, Marcel van Naken is cooking, she's cooking from the Dutch Ministry of Agriculture, Nature and Food Quality, but he's actually in a food shop, in a gourmet food shop, I believe, right? Marcel, you can better explain yourself to us.
Thanks, Dada. Yes, and that is true. And thanks, and hi everybody from around the globe. I'm actually in my local butcher shop, my local organic butcher shop. And since it's about midday here in the Netherlands, I'm not cooking, I'm actually shopping. And look what a wonderful shop this is. In the back, you see my friend Alex, who runs the shop. He's the best butcher in town, and we better support him all. And he's got this wonderful shop that caters to his customers, and he cannot do it on his own. And that is vital to his business model. He knows the people who grow their cows, who grow their pigs, who grow the pigs that he makes the food from. And this chain management is very important, of course, within the organic system, but also in other systems. Food quality, food safety, food security has all to do with chain management. And that can be done in a climate smart way, of course. But what is needed to actually do that? The vital component is bringing people together, building partnerships. If you know where your food comes from as a customer, and you go to one of those lovely gourmet shops, and as a shop owner, you know who actually delivers your produce and works for you to get you the best ingredients, then you build trust within the chain. How do you bring partnerships together? For that, and Lindiwe already mentioned it, and Hans already mentioned it, we need matchmaking. We need to get the solutions that are out there to the problems. And whether the solutions come from science, come from NGOs, come from governments, or indeed, most importantly, from the private sector, we need to get those solutions to work for people like Alex in his shop. And that is what GACSA comes in. GACSA has a unique membership, an enormous membership, a growing membership, and a universal membership in terms of all around the globe. So problems that are solved, that are being solved within knowledge institutions all around the globe, for local circumstances, that are relevant for other circumstances around the globe, can be distributed through the GACSA matchmaking system. And that is important. That is how we can scale. That is how we can better work together. And why are we doing that? As Lindiwe already mentioned, we need a food system approach. All the world will come together in New York at the Food System Summit in the autumn of 2021. And that's where we need to deliver. That's where we need to deliver for our customers, for a climate smart planet, and indeed for Alex, to make sure that he can start producing even better food for his customers. Over to you, Dada. And if I can bring you something, just let me know. I'll fly it over to Bali.
I'm going to have a very long list. Thank you, Marcel, for illustrating so very well the partnership between you and your butcher, for example, as a prime example of partnership. But my only question is, does your wife know that the shopping list and you're going to be delayed in buying whatever she sent you to buy?
She knows everything.
Okay, thank you very much, Marcel, for illustrating partnerships really that GACSA brings forward. And so, last but not the least, our master chef, we go back again to Australia, the land down under, and we've got our master chef, Jamie Ibister, who's the chef ambassador for the environment of Australia. And Chef Jamie, you there? We would like to know what's the experience of Australia in spicing up investments on climate smart agriculture. I can see you're very busy there.
Hi, Dada. Thank you. And it's great to be able to be part of this and to hear from so many of colleagues from different parts of the world, particularly from colleagues in Indonesia, from Zimbabwe, from Norway, and here from Australia as well. So for me, it's obviously evening, and so in terms of cooking, we're cooking dinner. And I thought I'd share first of all some of the experiences about what we've learnt in Australia about cooking and creating climate smart agriculture. You know, in Australia, we're I think, as my colleague Lily said, we're a multicultural country. We've brought together lots of different experiences and perspectives around how we manage our land, our farming, and our agriculture. But we've also realised that we're a very diverse continent. We're a continent that has challenges in terms of water security. We have a range of different soils. And we've realised increasingly that we need to look at ways we develop sustainable farming practices. And critical to that is looking at how we manage the water that we've got in the most efficient way. When we're cooking, that we're looking at really just utilising the resources we need rather than going beyond. In terms of the soils, that we're looking at how we don't overcook them, the ingredients that we use, whether it's you know, capsicum or whether it's garlic, that we look at bringing the raw flavour, and with that means how we look after our soils. We utilise less tilling and fertilisers that can ensure that we can protect that carbon, sequester the carbon, and in the longer term keep the soil sustainable. But then the next bit of it really, I guess, in Australia is us learning about how we actually cook. And one of the key parts of that is how we get the mix between the role of private sector, business and government. And with that, increasingly realising that if you're going to develop climate smart agricultural practices, sustainable farming, you need to have incentives between government and private sector that is going to incentivise inputs that are going to be driving sustainable farming, that we're supporting farmers, that they can deliver sustainable practices that are going to look after their land and look after their products, and then how we put that support farmers to get that products to market, transport that and be able to sell it in a way where they're able to make a profit, but also continue to develop and support that holistic farming practices going forward. And the final thing on Australia is, you know, sadly, some of these things in Australia we should have learned a lot earlier, but realising how much knowledge there is and practices from our Indigenous communities, Indigenous farmers, and how over many years they've brought a very sustainable approach to looking after the land. And I think the key thing on that is that when you finished the Australian meal, you've done the stir fry or the Moroccan curry, that you need to cool it. You need to cool it, you can't go straight to eat it. And with that, it means that you're only growing, cooking and eating what you really need. And this is an issue I think that's increasingly important for us in terms of the consumption side of it. The next meal I just wanted to briefly touch on, Dada, is discussing about how has that sort of led into some of our thinking about how we work in the region and how we've supported a number of our farmers and communities in the Southeast Asia and the Pacific region. And from our experience, it's not about bringing our recipes to them. It's about looking at what our experiences about trying to promote sustainable farming and climate smart agricultural practices are, both in relation to the process that's driven that and how that can then be reflected into the approach that different communities and farmers may take in different countries. So, for example, in the Pacific and Southeast Asia, we know agriculture is in many situations the centre of life. It is the essence of many people's rural communities' identity, and particularly for women. And with that, it's in many instances, it's smallholder farmers. So how do we get those same practices where we're trying to promote and support sustainable practices for smallholder farmers and give them the skills and knowledge and the policy environment that can best drive profit going forward? As one of my colleagues says, it's about the special sauce. If you can't provide that profit, that opportunity for farmers to live a life in dignity and be able to make a profit from their practices. Now, unfortunately, more often than not, though, we will over time degrade our soils, degrade our farming practices going forward. And so one of the issues we've looked at is, again, our experience on water security, how you look at rainwater harvesting, how you're looking at soils management, how you're looking at seeds. And the final part of it, as I said, about the how, about the mix between the cooking is between the private sector and government. How do we provide the financing for smallholder farmers in difficult times to be able to gain the access for their inputs, to have confidence that they can invest in a way that's going to be sustainable, where they're not having to sell their produce in a way that's going to be unsustainable for their own profit when the market of prices are down. And this more holistic approach is critical to smart climate agriculture, because if farmers don't feel that they can support and have a sustainable business, then unfortunately we know that we move to very quickly mechanisms that degrade the soils and the lifestyles that many people have. So the last thing to sort of say is, as I said, is it's critical that we at times reflect, that we slow cook things for flavour, that we take time, that we're not always rushing. And at the very end of the time, we need to also make sure that smart climate agriculture, we still celebrate and we still enjoy ourselves and we come together as one. And so cheers from Australia. Thank you, Dada.
Cheers, Chef Jamie. Thank you so much for pushing forward some of the critical elements, such as timing, letting it cool down, letting it simmer. And these are very critical elements, as well as I think you've also answered some of the questions that are already being asked in the question and answer portion. But before we go into the question and answer portion, I just would like to stress that I think we also, GACSA also achieve a certain level of gender balance amongst the cook. We have 3 female cooks and 3 male chefs. If I'm counting it right, without even us really forcefully planning on that. So very happy to see that as well. These are all our master chefs from all over the world. Can I just ask our audience to just give us a virtual clap for everyone who shared their recipes and their menus and visited their food shops and food producers. So really amazing to see all our kitchens from all over the world. There is Yana, who I see that the question and answer portion has been quite on fire. And Yana has been collecting your questions, but I have managed to have a sneak peek into some of the questions. And I think there's a lot of, I'm just gonna take the repeated questions for the private sector And Tony, there's a lot of questions for you, and I think that Chef Jamie should also answer some of these questions. Chef Tony and Chef Jamie, is there a special recipe for the small island development states from the private sector, I suppose, from World Business Council for Sustainable Development? That's the question. As well as I think there's a question of why are actually the private sector, or why are investors putting money into CSA? They wanted to see what do you think are the incentives for private sector to do that. That's so far what I have gathered, but I haven't been monitoring, so I'm gonna ask Yana after this to send us some questions. But let's have Tony and Chef Jamie, Chef Tony and Chef Jamie, give us some of their incoming recipes.
Of course, thanks, Dada. So just to address the small island developing states question, then I also typed the response back in the chat because I was so keen to share a really strong report by the World Meteorological Organization, which shares every year the state of climate services around the world and includes a really detailed analysis of those services in small island developing states. I'd also like to mention that the report being produced by the Global Commission on Adaptation around the rollout and blueprint for digital advisory services includes small island developing states and, of course, important regions like Asia Pacific in its findings. So please look out for that as well. And I've shared some links. On the business case and why should investors get involved in this, I also shared some of the outcomes of things like market growth for digital climate services. If you look at areas and many countries across sub-Saharan Africa, for example, around 90% of the market for these services remains untapped. And I mentioned before that it's obviously really important to have a very strong business case for how those services can be used and adopted. But ultimately, we're seeing a lot of businesses start up, succeed and grow effectively in rolling out weather services, climate services to farmers, but also using business models that mean that the farmer doesn't have to be the person paying. There are ways to support that through the public sector and ways to achieve that through other agri-businesses that can fund it. So we are really seeing a good return on investment for those types of approaches, albeit making sure that that investment is done in a good policy enabling environment for the business to flourish.
Thank you, Chef Tony. Chef Jamie, any insights on these? Why do you think the private sector should?
Thank you a lot, Dada. I mean, maybe on the first question of small island developing states, and from our perspective, particularly our Pacific Island family and colleagues, we know water security and soils are key challenges in small island states. We know that in the Pacific Islands they're the most struggle with the greatest issues about access to water, about water security. And we know it's like cooking. If you can't get the fuel, then you can't cook. And so that water is so central to the constraint for it. I think also the issue about customers, so access to markets. That we know that unless, particularly in small holding communities and that, where you're often dealing with challenges around logistics and transport roads, so smallholder farmers, if they can't get their produce to market in a timely fashion, then they struggle to be able to make the profit and be able to make the sustainable sort of business going forward. On the issue around sort of why people are investors are investing in climate sustainable agriculture, I think, from my perspective, two things. One of them, to be honest, I think there's an increasing realization that, our environment in our world is only, it hasn't got indefinite resources. We need to protect and sustain the environment, the soils, the biodiversity, etc. that we have. And we need to have farming practices that are going to ensure that. And so I think there's investors who increasingly, as our populations have grown and whatever else, realise that actually for their own business model longer term, they need to ensure that the investments are going to be not just profitable today, but in the decades to come. And so I think that's one of the drivers. And the second one, to be honest, I think is customers. Customers increasingly want to purchase produce and goods that are going to be good for the climate. We're increasingly aware that how climate's impacting on our day-to-day lives and our environment. And I think, you know, as at times individuals or communities have levels of frustration about what they can do and whether their governments are doing enough or not, one of the actions is they can purchase and buy goods that they feel are going to promote sustainable practices. And I think that connection between the investor, investors wanting to support sustainable practices and customers wanting to buy them is really, in the longer term, I think what's going to drive, hopefully, that scale up of climate smart agriculture.
Thank you, Chef Jamie and Chef Tony. Yana, do we have more comments and questions?
Chef Dada, thank you so much. Well, to be honest, the question and answers, it's been on fire. So I'm trying my best, and all the other chefs are helping me as well to answer these questions. First of all, there were several questions on how to make sustainable food more affordable to everyone. This question was addressed to all our chefs. So if I can ask you to maybe give a round, or if you would like to choose who would like to answer.
This kind of question, let's ask the World Bank for their insight on how food can be made affordable, perhaps. And then let's ask some of the panelists if they have some ideas. But let's start off with Chef Ademola. You're muted. Can you unmute yourself?
Okay, is it okay now? Can you hear me? Yes. How do we make food more affordable, sustainable food? Now, I mentioned my intervention can be summarized in 3 key ingredients: policies, technologies, finance. So once you get those 3 ingredients right, you can achieve whatever you want to achieve through the food system. In the context of making food prices more affordable, for instance, if you have the right policies that provides better access for farmers to inputs and to markets, and you create the policies, and these policies are applied both at the demand and the supply aspects of the value chain, they will make food more available. For instance, the cost of fertilizers are very expensive to the farmers in the local community because of so many factors associated with the value chain. I'm talking about Africa now. In so many factors that are associated with transportation, importing, and some of these things. So these are some of the areas in which subsidies that are used need to shift to productive climate smart enhancing production systems. So when you shift the subsidies and the support that are received by farmers to some of these environmentally friendly enhancing systems, prices are going to be much lower and going to be much more affordable to the average farmers. And some of these shifts in moving up subsidies and so on requires better policies and shifting them towards a means whereby the private sector will play a more active role in the value chain system. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ademola. Is there any insight on that? Maybe Marcel, you're in the butcher shop. Any insight on how you think food prices can be lowered?
I'm no longer in the butcher shop. I took a bicycle ride, 3 minutes, and I'm back home now. The produce is in the fridge.
Same from the West, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it is an important question. How do you make it affordable? And it also, I think, relates to other questions that have been asked in the Q&A section, and also to the previous question. And I would like to take a little bit of a step back. And if you look at the system now, what we see with this whole COVID issue, and what we see, we've effectively been handed a bit of an X-ray of the food system. We have been handed a map on where the vulnerabilities in food systems are. And I think that is an important lesson for us to learn. What are those vulnerabilities and how can we address them? How can we indeed address them in a holistic way, in a food system way, in a food system approach? We cannot just isolate one issue, try to tackle that, and think that we've done a good job. And the same goes, of course, for climate change. Climate change is as systemic a vulnerability to the food system as is COVID. Climate change works on a longer term in time, in terms of time. So it goes slower. The COVID crisis was a quick one, but it is as systemic, and we need to address those things in a holistic way. That's why the Food System Summit is so important. And that's where I come to the point, any company that works outside of those vulnerabilities, does not take care of its vulnerabilities, is in the medium to long term not sustainable financially. You need, if you want, and Jamie also mentioned it, you need to have a long-term approach towards those issues, and in this context, especially climate change, if you want to stay in business. And for that, we need to partner up, once again, what I mentioned in the shop. That is very important. But you need to have that medium to long-term approach to stay in business, otherwise you're simply out. And that will go to customer prices as well. If you're in a losing business, you can't compete. Thank you.
Dada, can I come in?
Yes, Chef Hans.
Yeah, thank you very much. I will take a couple of those questions together. I think when it comes to, I would say, affordable food, I think we have to have a deeper dive in the value chain. Because I think if we can make and shorten our value chains, you can have a more affordable price, a more fair price to the farmers, and also fair price to the consumers. But we have to shorten our value chains. So that means that we don't always have to bring food from one region to another region. Secondly, I think it's important to show to the consumers, but also to everyone in the value chain, where the margins are. In the Netherlands, we have done research to the margins in the whole value chain of a product. And there you see that the farmers are always at the end of the, I would say, chain. They get the less price, and the margin are going to other parties in the chain, whether it would be the agro-logistics elements, or I would say the supermarkets. And I think that's important to know, because then you can have a discussion, where should we give and how should we give a fair price to the consumers? And it's also about food losses. The more we can capture and reduce our food losses, more food is available, and it will mean less prices and a better income for the farmers, because now the price is also including the food they have lost, or the harvest they have lost. If you can reduce that post-harvest losses, you will see that they will get a better price. Then also there were quite some questions about our diets and whether or not meat or no meat. I think we have to diversify our diets. Then I'm coming, and I think it's important that we not only look to whether or no meat, but that we also diversify our diet, for example, to products coming from our fisheries and aquaculture. And there I think the small island states really deserve a special position. They are producers, of course, on a small scale, but with excellent products, whether it would be shrimps or whether it would be spices. And I think if we give them the possibility to scale up their sustainable production of fish or spices, I think there we create a way forward for the small island development state. But we have to give them a special position in this respect. And that's one of the reasons why the Netherlands is partnering with, for example, Grenada, to see how we can not only improve their sustainable production of spices, but also bring those spices to the market. And as the Prime Minister said, that spices will spice up our life. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hans. I think the mere issue of affordability brings so much other components of as you mentioned, the value chain and the whole food system. And I think before I get on to the next question from Yana, I wanted to ask, how do you go about, because there's multi-discipline and multi-departments that are involved, because you're not just working now on promoting agriculture practices, no? You're going into, I wanted to address this to Lily, from policy, from science translated into policy that involves several departments, several actors within governments. How do you propose now from agriculture to whole food systems, value chain, transport, energy? In my experience working with the ASEAN, the Intergovernmental Association of Southeast Asia, the mere topic, for example, that Lily is handling on climate information services, where the meteorological department is another one, and the agriculture department is another one, and making them talk is also one of the biggest challenges. Now, as Hans has refreshed our memory, it's the whole value chain, it's the whole food system. How do we move forward in making interrelations with the necessary stakeholders or the necessary departments in terms of governance at the governance level? Perhaps I would like to ask Lily to start off this conversation, and then I'll have a round with all of you with very quick intervention or reply to this question.
Thanks, Dada. That's a challenging question you ask there. And indeed, my experience working with value chains is probably the best place to demonstrate how multiple priorities, sometimes or often conflicting, actually can be managed. And you can move on. The value chains are a classic multidisciplinary space where you have different actors from different perspectives with very different priorities, different cultures and backgrounds coming together, trying to do linked activities. So you're trying to move a product along, and along the way, you have to build relationships and share information. And studying value chains for me has helped me understand how to actually, if you think of a government, they're really just one big value chain, you know, where the departments have to work together one way or another to deliver value for the citizens, right? And that value is interpreted in different ways. The same as our food system delivers multiple values to the different stakeholders that actually that are part of it. But you know, but if you try to comprehend everything, the bigness of it, you won't get anywhere. You'll be slow cooking something one day, and you'll be pressure cooking something, and you'll be stir frying something, and grilling and barbecuing something else, and then you won't just be able to do anything at all. So my approach to dealing with the complexity of food systems and conflicting priorities is to start in spaces where you can converse about a single thing. So often the easiest way into talking about addressing agricultural, climate smart agriculture is, what do the farmers want? That's one point. And also, what do the consumers want? So it's the 2 points. It's because all of us can relate to what a farmer needs and also what a consumer needs. And from there on, you start working towards smaller goals that move towards the bigger picture. My only advice when it comes to climate smart agriculture is don't get, and food systems, is don't get confronted by the gravity of the system that you're dealing with and the challenge. Face it head on by taking the steps that you need to do. And for me, partnering across very different types of stakeholders is the solution to that. Bring people along, have different perspectives, and be ready to work hard, because once you have that diversity, you will work hard for it. It will be a tough situation, but it will have such rewarding benefits from it.
Thanks, Lily. I like what you said. Start on a single issue. It could be so big, food system. I think Professor Lindiwe, do you want to say something?
Thank you very much, Dada. I believe we have a wonderful opportunity not to leave anyone behind, because for a long time we've been talking climate smart agriculture, and the A, agriculture, was the catchword. But if we start from the food, everybody eats food. So for me, that's why when we are taking a food systems approach, it's no brainer for anybody to say, do I belong to that discussion or not? Because everybody speaks to food, understands food, and needs food. That's point number one. So when we talk about leaving no one behind, the food systems or the food approach is already all encompassing and bringing everybody to the table. Now, who needs to be around that table? I have always found from my advocacy experience that when you allow those that are most affected by the problem to speak to the issue, you make faster gains towards your outcome. And in this case, those most affected by the issue are now the consumers, and they need a conducive policy environment. That policy has to speak to agriculture, which is the production component. It has to speak to the processing. It has to speak to the distribution of food. It has to speak to the climate that affects all of us. And climate change is a big game changer. So I think for the first time, we have a rallying point through the food systems approach where no one should be left behind, because no one is going to say, I'm not a farmer, I don't produce food, I'm not private sector, I'm not a donor, I don't fund research, I'm not a specialist in food. Everybody is involved. So let's make sure we create those platforms, GACSA being one, that bring everybody to the table. Then we provide those matchmaking opportunities for problems that meet solutions, challenges that meet opportunities. So that's what I wanted to bring across, that food systems, food approach is just an excellent way not to leave anybody behind.
You're very right, Chef Lindiwe. As in these challenging times, food is really the most compelling issue, especially in the time of pandemic, when some people have not gotten hungry before, have experienced hunger actually in this moment. So, and that is a very good rallying cry for us to respond to. I would like to pass on to Yana the microphone because there are some pressing questions coming from the chat room.
Thank you very much, Chef Dada. I would like to ask the IT support if they could give the mic, please, to one person from the audience, Mr. Patrick Kalash. He had very interesting questions to all the panelists. So, Patrick, if you can please summarize your questions, I think it would be very nice for everyone to hear them. Thank you.
Thank you, Yana and colleagues. Hope you can hear me.
Yes, very well.
Yeah, thank you all. Excellent session, very inspiring all around. Some of the questions were already kindly addressed by Tony. As I was listening, so I'll summarize. One was about investments. So thinking also about realigning existing investments or incentive systems and subsidy schemes to make them more CSA conducive or friendly was one of my questions, meaning not only to look at mobilizing additional investment, but looking at the large amounts that are going to support agricultural production globally. And there are breakdowns on those. So that was one particular question and an understood answer provided by Tony already. Thank you for that. And then my second point was around climate, because at FAO, where I'm sitting, we're looking at synergies, trade-offs between all environmental elements that certainly include climate, but also include biodiversity and land degradation. And some interventions, if we're not careful, or if they're not carefully designed, can actually benefit, let's say, climate, but they can have a potential detrimental effect on biodiversity. One example is planting monocultured forests that certainly will reduce greenhouse gas emissions, however, not be conducive for biodiversity, which is equally important all around. So that was my other question. So one was on investment, also looking at ongoing incentive and subsidy schemes, and the other one was how do we manage triple benefits across different environmental dimensions and managing trade-offs once they are there. Thank you so very much.
Tony, can you just respond quickly and also allow Chef Jamie to respond to some of these questions? But I think we are nearing the end of our session, so just time management.
Sure. Thank you, Dada, and thank you, Patrick, for the questions. Just to reiterate what I mentioned in the chat, and please do use the links. Obviously, many entities are looking at the realignment of subsidies in the political environment, and this includes, of course, countries across the entire world, since they're so interlinked on trade. For example, there is an initiative called the Just Rural Transition, which has a policy action committee looking into this, and I've been connected into them and some of their great work. I shared their website. I know the World Bank is also very active in this space, so any other speakers, please add on. I think there was a question as well around the importance of looking more broadly, not just at climate, but nature and all of these other trade-offs in the system. Ultimately, that's what the Food Systems Summit is doing by designing these action tracks where multiple dimensions can be considered as we look at the food system. So those action tracks are a really important example of trying to bring together those different communities who must work on multiple facets in their solutions. I hope that helps a bit, and hand over to any of the other speakers to add. Thank you.
Is there anyone who wanted to add to that?
I can add a little to that. Just like Tony mentioned, there's need to address a couple of distortions that are across the value chains. There are some, we sometimes, policymakers sometimes allocate funding, subsidies, and resources to issues or to systems that lead to environmental degradation. So when such policies, for instance, production support and all the likes, are channeled to public goods, they tend to yield better dividends and helps to remove such distortions. So those are some of the issues that are currently under discussions, are ongoing, that can help to make the food systems more efficient. Now, let me address the issue of trade-offs specifically, and it also links to the need for government institutions to work together. There has to be an alignment of goals. When you are asking multiple government departments to work together. So it's not easy, but that is the starting point to making sure that things are properly aligned. Bring environment, agriculture, and other disciplines together to contribute to setting of goals. Then develop a negotiated solution to achieving the goals. As far as that is concerned, then foster transparency in terms of monitoring the achievement of those goals. These are very, very important, both in addressing trade-off and also in addressing some of the distortions that are brought about by perverse subsidies to the food systems. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think we are down to our 5 minutes, and there's more intricate topics that are coming out on the way to subsidies and incentives. But I think I would like to bring our discussion back to the chairs, and especially I'm very concerned, how is our climate smart tiramisu doing from Chef Hans? I'm really looking forward to one day being able to taste that. And I think there are so many questions and comments that are very, very interesting in the question and answer. And I think that Yana will help us compile all the comments and the information on the question and answer, and we will all have a copy of us as documentation of all these comments and questions. And I think that some of our panelists can go back to all of you with with answers to some of your questions indicated there. So in our last 5 minutes of our cooking show, let's go back to our master chefs, our head chefs of GACSA, our chairs. And especially for me, I'm very concerned about the climate smart tiramisu. Chef Hans, how is the tiramisu doing? Please save some parts for me when we see each other, or you can bring it over to Bali when Indonesia lets you in. But please, these are the closing remarks from the both of you that we would like to hear.
Thank you very much, Dada, and thank you so much for moderating this inspiring session in a different way. And I think if we could do all these sessions more in this way, I think it will be much more inspiring and solution-oriented for all the issues we are tackling. But I would like to say, when it comes to tiramisu, and of course, I'll bring you my tiramisu, and it will go now into the refrigerator because it has to be cold, of course, before you eat it. But when you look to a tiramisu, it looks very complex and looks, how can I do it? But I try to show you how simple it is if you bring the right ingredients and mix them and match them together. And I think that's what we, have to do, because we are making all our issues so complex. We want to link all the issues to each other. When we speak about the food system approach at the global level, we have to take care of everything. But I said we have global problems, but we need national and local solutions. And those solutions can be made much more simple than we think. You already said it. We have to bring the necessary people to the table, not all stakeholders, because you will never find a solution, but bring the necessary stakeholders to the table at the national or local level. Then you find it's easier to find answers, easier to make a tiramisu as well. But it means also, for example, with the private sector, we always ask for investments, etc. But did we ever ask the private sector, what do you need from us to give your investment? And that we are doing now in a round table. We're going to start a round table for a program of food losses in Nigeria. We bring not 100 people together. We bring probably not more than 50 people together. We bring in 10 local private sector and 3 or 4 international private sector. But we'll ask them, what do you need from us to invest? And that means sometimes, I would say infrastructure, sometimes taking care of the first risk, but they are willing to invest. And I think that's how we can approach it. Then it becomes much easier to find solutions at the local level and the national scale. And it is everything what you said about matchmaking. Matching investments, matching innovations, matching technologies, and certainly matching training, not only of the farms, but in the whole value chain. And that's everything about the secret of the chef, the secret of the tiramisu. I think also the secret how we can find real solutions on the ground, because we have to go beyond what we do nowadays, having a lot of discussions, a lot of reports, a lot of advices, a lot of summits. But what will happen after? What will change after the summit? And that needs to be action on the ground. Thank you.
On my part, I think just to emphasize that let's not forget that the big challenge we are trying to address is climate change. We are looking for solutions, and those solutions need to be taken to scale so that we achieve impact. And as my co-chef Hans has said, those solutions to a global problem really have to be local to start with. And one of the burning questions that I've seen in our chat is on the issue of meat. And I want to declare that I'm one of those red meat producers, because I believe that Africa needs the protein. One of the big challenges we are facing is protein shortage. One of the big problems we are facing is anemia, which emanates from low iron. And the solution could lie from our free-ranging chickens, our free-ranging goats, and our free-ranging beef-producing animals. So what are we doing about being climate smart about that? I am producing goats that are free-ranging on my farm. And as I said for my breakfast, I've just had meat that is dried, been kept because we don't have a good cold chain. And that's one of the solutions we are looking for in the matchmaking platforms to solve the problem of wastage because of the poor cold chain that we don't have. But coming back to this issue of red meat, we cannot have a blanket solution that says no one should eat the red meat. It's all about who, what, and how much. And there are people who don't have the choice. So are we saying they should die of anemia? I was raised by a grandmother who gave me just 40 grams of meat a day. And that's why I'm a strong, big Zulu woman, and I'm still proud of that heritage. And I'm saying there are climate smart ways of producing those free-ranging animals to solve an African problem. And let's allow that. Let's allow science. Thanks to the Australians, I'm told there's a new technology of methane absorbing weed that has been produced now that can absorb all the methane which is produced by the animals, making them climate smart technologies that can be scaled up. So let's allow science to solve the problems. Let's allow local solutions. Let's allow, as Hans says, those that are affected by the problem to come round the table with a defined problem and a solution, and we match these needs to supply. And I think we are well placed as GACSA as a platform that is well placed to be providing great opportunity to match problems with climate smart solutions and challenges with climate smart opportunities. Over to you, Dada. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think we really need a part 2 of this discussion where we're also in our kitchen or in our farms, because what you mentioned is something very close to my heart. I'm looking for the low emissions livestock. I believe they're eating, I think down under in Australia, New Zealand, they're trying to introduce seaweed being eaten by livestock, and that reduces their methane emission. I think we've reached the end of our time, but I wanted to ask Simon, is there a special mystery announcement from Chef Hans, or this is the end?
No, I think it's been done.
Okay.
Thank you so much. I just would like to just say thank you for everyone, for all the speakers, for putting this beautiful side event together, you know, for your families that they are allowing you to take over on the kitchens while they are probably starving in a corner, or for the other, but thank you so much. Thanks for the cooking, Hans. Thank you, Lindiwe, and thank you all, Jamie, from the glass of wine that you share with us. Thank you very much, everyone.
It's such a pleasure to moderate this, and I would like Simon to please bang your pots.
Yeah, I got them in here.
Our webinar.
There you go, guys.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.